Stop the cameras. Stop them right now. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. His hand trembled slightly as he held up an old, yellowed photograph. The entire crew froze. In 20 years of production, no one had ever seen him do this. Who brought this photograph into my studio? The silence that followed would change 3 lives forever. 48 hours earlier, the Dr. Phil show had received what seemed like a routine family dispute case. Margaret Chin, 68, had contacted the show about her daughter Rachel, 34, who refused to attend family gatherings and had cut off contact with her grandmother for the past 5 years. I don't understand what happened, Margaret had told the pre-interview producer, her voice breaking. We were so close. Rachel was my only child, and she was everything to me. Then one day, she just stopped coming home. She won't tell me why. The production team had seen hundreds of similar cases. Family estrangement. Unresolved conflicts. Communication breakdowns. Standard territory for the show. They scheduled the taping for Thursday afternoon. But no one knew that an old photograph, buried for 40 years, was about to surface. Rachel arrived at the studio an hour before taping. The production assistant noticed immediately that she was clutching a manila envelope so tightly her knuckles were white. Are you okay? The assistant asked. I found something, Rachel whispered. Last week. In my grandmother's attic. She's been in hospice, and I was helping sort her things. I found a box of old photographs she'd hidden behind the insulation. The assistant nodded, assuming it was just old family pictures. Do you want to show them during the taping? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I should. But I need Dr. Phil to see it. I need someone to tell me I'm not crazy. What Rachel had found would shatter everything her mother had ever told her. The taping began normally. Margaret sat in the guest chair, composed and dignified in her navy blue dress. She spoke eloquently about her pain, about the daughter she'd lost, about the grandchildren she barely knew. Dr. Phil, I raised Rachel alone after my husband died when she was 3. Margaret explained. I sacrificed everything for her. I worked 2 jobs to put her through college. And now, she won't even return my calls. The audience murmured sympathetically. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his expression serious but compassionate. And you have no idea what caused this breach? None, Margaret said firmly. One day we were fine, the next day she was gone. Dr. Phil turned to Rachel, who sat rigidly in the opposite chair. Rachel, your mother says she doesn't know what happened. But you do, don't you? Rachel's hands shook as she clutched the manila envelope. I do now. Tell me. 5 years ago, my grandmother, my mother's mother, told me something. She was drinking, and it just came out. She said my father didn't die in a car accident like my mother always told me. Margaret's face went pale. Rachel, we've been over this. Let her finish. Dr. Phil said quietly. Rachel's voice cracked. Grandma said my father didn't die. She said my mother drove him away. That there was a fight, and she told him to leave and never come back. She said he tried to stay in my life. But Mom threatened to call the police if he ever contacted me. The studio went completely silent. Margaret stood up. That's not true. My mother was drunk, she was confused, she didn't know what she was saying. Sit down, please. Dr. Phil's voice was calm but firm. Rachel, what else did your grandmother tell you? She said my father tried for years to reach me. That he sent letters and cards that my mother threw away. That he stood outside my school just to see me, until Mom threatened to get a restraining order. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. Do you have any evidence of this? Rachel's hands trembled as she opened the manila envelope. Last week, I found these in Grandma's attic. She kept them hidden for 40 years. She pulled out a stack of unopened birthday cards. 23 of them. Each addressed to Rachel in careful handwriting. Each postmarked from different states over the years. None of them ever delivered. Subscribe and leave a comment. because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil walked over and took the cards carefully. He opened the first one. Inside was a birthday card for a 5-year-old, with a handwritten message. To my beautiful Rachel, happy 5th birthday. Daddy loves you and thinks about you every day. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to go away. Love always, Dad. He opened another. And another. Each one dated a year later. Each one expressing love and longing. Each one never delivered. Margaret's face had turned white. I can explain. Not yet. Dr. Phil's voice was steel. He looked at Rachel. Is there something else in that envelope? Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. She pulled out an old photograph. This was at the bottom of the box. What Dr. Phil saw in that photograph made him do something he'd never done in 2 decades of television. The photograph showed a young couple at a hospital, holding a newborn baby. The woman was clearly Margaret, 20 years younger. The man beside her was smiling at the baby with pure love in his eyes. But that wasn't what stopped Dr. Phil cold. On the back of the photograph, in faded ink, was written, David, Margaret, and Rachel first day as a family. David, always remember you wanted this. You begged to stay. Em made the choice. Mom! Dr. Phil looked at the note, then at Margaret, then back at the photograph. His jaw clenched. Stop the cameras. His voice was quiet but absolute. Stop them right now. The crew froze. The director looked confused. Dr. Phil, we're in the middle of... I said stop them. Now. Dr. Phil held up the photograph. Who brought this photograph into my studio? Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He walked to the edge of the stage and spoke directly to the production team. Get me a private room. Both of them. Now. And someone find out if this David is still alive. He turned to the audience. Folks, we're going to take an unexpected break. What you just witnessed is going to require some time to process properly. The audience sat in stunned silence as Dr. Phil led Margaret and Rachel off stage. A production assistant quickly ushered the audience to a holding area. In the private room backstage, Dr. Phil sat across from Margaret and Rachel. He placed the photograph on the table between them. Margaret, I'm going to ask you once, and I need the absolute truth. Is what's written on the back of this photograph accurate? Margaret's composure finally cracked. She buried her face in her hands. I was young. I was scared. David was, he was going to leave me anyway. I could see it. So I pushed him out first. Mom! Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. He wanted to stay in your life. Margaret continued, her voice breaking. He tried. For years. But I was so angry, so hurt. I told him if he ever contacted you, I'd tell everyone he'd abused us. I'd destroy him. So he stopped trying. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Do you understand what you did? You didn't just take Rachel's father from her. You took her truth. You built her entire childhood on a lie. You made her grieve a man who was alive and wanted to be her father. Margaret sobbed. I know. I've known for years. But I didn't know how to undo it. Rachel sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her face. Dr. Phil picked up the photograph. This picture, and that note from your mother, she knew. She watched you do this, and it haunted her enough that she kept the evidence. That tells me even she knew it was wrong. He turned to Rachel. Your instinct to pull away from your mother wasn't rebellion. It was your subconscious protecting you from more lies. You felt the truth even before you knew it. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil stood and walked to the door. He spoke to someone outside, then returned with a tablet. While we were in here, my team has been working. They found David. Rachel's head snapped up. What? He lives in Oregon. He's a high school teacher. Never remarried. Never had other children. Dr. Phil's voice softened. And when my producer called him and explained who they were, he broke down crying. Margaret's face crumpled. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth. Dr. Phil placed the tablet on the table. He's on a video call right now. Rachel, if you want to talk to him, he's waiting. If you're not ready, that's okay too. But he's here, and he's been waiting for this moment for 31 years. The room fell silent except for Rachel's quiet sobs. She reached for the tablet with shaking hands. Dr. Phil gently turned the screen toward her. On the screen was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and Rachel's same green eyes. When he saw her, his face dissolved into tears. Rachel? His voice cracked. Oh my God! Rachel. Dad? The word came out as a whisper, like she was testing it for the first time in her adult life. I'm here, baby. I'm here. I never stopped thinking about you. Not one single day. Dr. Phil quietly stood and gestured for Margaret to follow him out of the room. As they left, he could hear Rachel and her father talking, crying, beginning the long journey of healing. In the hallway, Dr. Phil turned to Margaret with an expression of deep disappointment. You need to understand the magnitude of what you did. You didn't just lie to your daughter. You stole 31 years from her and from a man who loved her. That's not protection. That's not even selfishness. That's cruelty. Margaret nodded, mascara running down her face. What do I do now? You get into intensive therapy. You work on understanding why you thought this was acceptable. And you prepare for the possibility that Rachel may never forgive you. That's the consequence of your choice. He held up the photograph. But here's what I want you to remember. Your mother kept this. She kept all those cards. She knew what you'd done was wrong, and some part of her wanted the truth to come out someday. She gave Rachel a gift by saving these, even if it was 40 years too late. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. An hour later, the show resumed taping. Dr. Phil explained to the audience what had happened off camera, without revealing David's personal information. The audience sat in stunned silence. What you witnessed today, Dr. Phil said directly to the camera, is what happens when we let our pain and fear make our decisions. Margaret made a choice out of hurt and anger, and it cost 3 people decades of relationship. Rachel lost her father. David lost his daughter. And Margaret lost her integrity and, ultimately, both her daughter and her mother. He held up the old photograph one more time. But this photograph, and a dying grandmother's conscience, gave them a chance to rebuild. That's the power of truth. It's painful. It's devastating. But it's also the only foundation on which real healing can be built. 6 months later, the Dr. Phil team followed up. Rachel and David had been meeting regularly, building a relationship that had been denied to them for 3 decades. David had attended Rachel's children's school events, met his grandchildren, and slowly become part of the family he'd been excluded from. Margaret was in therapy, working through her own childhood trauma that had led to her controlling behavior. Rachel had agreed to limited supervised contact with her mother, but the relationship remained strained. Dr. Phil gave us something we thought was lost forever, David said in the follow-up interview. He didn't just reunite us. He validated Rachel's instincts, helped her see that what she felt all those years was real. That's worth more than I can ever express. The photograph now sits in a frame in Rachel's home. Not on a shelf, but on her dining room table, where she and her father often sit together, making up for lost time. The yellowed edges and faded colors are a reminder of all the years they lost. But the smiles in the picture, young David looking at newborn Rachel with such love, are a reminder of what was always there, waiting to be reclaimed. Dr. Phil kept a copy of that photograph in his office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of why he does what he does. Every family has secrets, he said in a later interview. But secrets are like poison. They contaminate everything they touch. Truth is painful, but lies are fatal to relationships. The episode became one of the most watched in the show's history. Not because of drama or conflict, but because it showed something rare, the moment when truth cuts through decades of deception, when a grandmother's guilty conscience gives a gift from beyond the grave, and when a simple photograph becomes the key to unlocking a family's future. Margaret's mother passed away 3 weeks after Rachel found the photographs. At the funeral, Rachel placed one of her father's unopened birthday cards in her grandmother's casket, the one from her 10th birthday, the year she'd asked her mother why her father had abandoned them. "Thank you for keeping the truth alive," Rachel whispered. "Even when it was hidden, you made sure it could be found." Dr. Phil's final thoughts on the case were simple but profound. That grandmother carried the weight of her daughter's lie for 40 years. She watched Rachel grow up believing her father didn't want her. She knew the truth and said nothing, until alcohol loosened her tongue one night. Then she died, but not before making sure the evidence survived. That's complicated love. That's guilt. That's redemption in its own way. He looked directly at the camera. If you're keeping a secret that's hurting someone you love, especially a child, understand this: the truth will come out. It always does. The only question is whether you'll be the one to tell it, or whether it'll surface after you're gone. Choose truth. Choose it now, while there's still time to heal together. The old photograph, the stack of cards, the grandmother's note, they all became symbols of a profound truth. Love can survive lies, but only if someone is brave enough to excavate the truth buried beneath them. In this case, that someone was a dying grandmother who chose, finally, to let the light in.